In this video, we are going to talk about how you can build a property empire with no money. I'm here with Jaco from Prosperity Enterprises today. And Jaco, what would you say would be the best way to build a property portfolio if you have no money?
Thank you, Louis. One of the best concepts that I've learned about is how to use leverage. And when I talk about leverage, I talk about OPM, OPS, and OPT. That's OPM for other people's money, OPS for other people's skills, and OPT for other people's time. You want to leverage to build a property empire. So you want to make sure that you don't use your own money when buying property. If you can use the bank's money to build your property portfolio, why on earth would you want to use your own money? And that is always the advice that I give my clients, is use as little or none of your own money when acquiring property.
A lot of people talk about interest. You know, when you use the bank's money or when you use other people's money, you need to pay interest. And I think this is something that pops up quite a lot. People say that, yes, but you'll have to pay back the loan 3 times what it will actually cost you. And what do you say about that? Or what would you say to someone that says, yes, interest is a big problem?
You know, the great thing is I'm not paying the interest. My tenants are. And that's what makes it so amazing. That's why I always take the longest bond possible, so that I can have better cash flow on a property. So I always advise my clients to take a 30-year bond. And people will always ask me, why on earth are you taking a 30-year bond? And my response is always the same. It's because there's no 40-year bond available. And what I'm trying to say by this is that everything for me in property is about cash flow. I want this property transaction and this property deal to happen without me having to put any money in. And a longer bond, like I've explained now, reduces your monthly payment, which means you cash flow easier and you sit with a property that's not costing you any money.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that, you can always pay off a 30-year loan in 20 years.
Of course.
But you can't pay off a 20-year loan in 30 years.
That's right.
So that's definitely quite interesting. You know, when getting started with property, the fact of the matter is you need some form of income. You need some form of credibility and affordability, as well as reserves. What are some rule of thumbs that you would recommend people to stick to when starting with property?
Make sure, like you said, Louis, that you've got a stable income. That is a key component to using other people's money, is earning a salary big enough so that you can actually get financing from the bank. The rule of thumb is that you could get about 1/3 of your income allocated to a bond payment, which means that if you earn, for example, 21,000 Rand a month, you could get a 7,000 Rand bond payment, or bond with a bond payment of 7,000 Rand. So make sure, even if you run your own business, that you have a monthly income that enables you to get financing from the bank, because now a whole world opens to you where you can get financing from the bank and where you can actually use the bank's money to build your property portfolio and not your own.
Yeah, so leverage opens so much doors, even if you earn a low salary. It's obviously the easiest way to buy property is to use the bank's money. So at the end of the day, building a property empire comes down to using leverage, whether it's using the bank's money, partnerships, or even private financing. When it comes down to using leverage, Jaco, what would you say are some of the most basic tips that you need to implement to successfully use other people's money?
Like we said, you need a stable income. With a stable income, it opens the doors for you to get financing from the bank. But then you also need a good credit score. You need to pay your bills on time. You need to make sure that you have credit. A lot of people have the policy that they don't want to have any debt whatsoever. That's one of the worst things you can do, because if you don't have debt, you can't get debt. So there's no credit score. There's no tracking of how good you are with debt. So having a small clothing account, having a small overdraft, having a credit card with a small balance is very important, because those things actually build your credit score and enable you to get financing later on. So you want to make sure that your credit utilization rate is low. That means that you only use a small portion of the credit that you have, and make sure that you pull a credit report on yourself every single year to actually see what your credit score is like, to see what outstanding bills there are, to make sure that they are all up to date, and there's nothing that you've forgotten.
I think having a good credit score comes down to, having the right mentality about debt. And I think this is something that a lot of people in South Africa struggle with, is using debt incorrectly or buying consumer items and spending debt on all the wrong things. And I think it's a great principle to kind of use because it teaches you how to manage your money, how to manage debt, and to get into the mentality of using debt to your advantage. Another thing that I know is very important is reserves. What is something that you would add on to when it comes to reserves for property investing?
It's often going to be necessary for you to incur certain costs when you acquire a property. There are transfer costs, there are bond registration costs. The banks might, in some situations, require you to put down a deposit. Now, if you've built up those reserves, it enables you to actually acquire that property. But that being said, even those funds could be accessed from other people. So it is possible to really buy property with none of your own money.
Now, it's just a bit more difficult, but
That's
if
right.
there's a will, there's a way. When it comes to someone, let's say they don't have a stable income, they don't have a good credit score, or they don't really have a healthy reserve fund, what strategies can they follow to get into property? Or what would you do if you were in the situation where you had no income?
A great strategy that you can follow is a rent-to-rent model, where you actually don't buy property and you don't finance it. So you rent a property and then you rent it out, you sublet it. So you can rent a property, turn it into a multi-let and rent it out to multiple tenants. Obviously, you need to change the lease agreement to allow you to sublet. That's very important. Or you could, for example, rent a property, furnish it, and rent it out as an Airbnb or a short-term rental. That's another option that you have with a property like that. You can also source deals for other people, so you can find property investment opportunities for other people and earn money in that way in order for you to build up a reserve so that you can acquire property.
Thank you, Jaco. I think there is other ways to get into property even though you don't have an income or a salary. But at the end of the day, it's so much easier to use the bank's money. Just work on your credit score, work on a stable income, and build a healthy reserve fund. It's just going to be so much easier to get started and to build a much larger portfolio.
Absolutely.
And at the end of the day, if you are struggling with these steps, it might not be the best idea to invest in property if you can't work on your credit score, or if you can't work on finding a job with a stable income. With that said, building an empire is not easy, but with the help of other people's money, it's definitely possible.